different videos that you can see on YouTube, a very funny one of which is the one you see here on the screen, in which he talks about life after death by PowerPoint, and it's something that I think you'll enjoy and draw a lot of lessons from. So finally, I just want all of you once again to think about ways that you can be more powerful speakers. And I'm reminded of the quote that the former British Prime Minister used in describing Barack Obama's speaking style. In describing President Obama, Prime Minister Brown once said, "When Obama speaks, he gives listeners confidence, not in him, but in themselves. It is said that when Cicero spoke, people said, 'That was a great speech.' But when Demosthenes spoke, they said, 'Let's march.'" Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Quite an eye-opener and very comprehensive. Folks, now the floor is open for question and answer. So if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. There's a hand icon on your webinar console. So if you raise your hand, I will be able to give you an opportunity to speak up, Bill, and ask your question. Or equally, you could post your questions in the chat box, and I will be happy to read them over for you. Now, any questions? Let me see. There are some people who had earlier raised their hands. Let's see. Okay, I'm receiving a lot of comments. Outstanding presentation. Are we getting the material? Yes, we will be sending the material to you all post-webinar. Okay, there is one question posted by Brother Ahmed. How do we overcome the language barrier in English in this part of the world? Any particular tips for us who at times are required to deliver presentation in English, but it is not our native language?
I would simply say to that what I tell all of my clients around the world. A lot of that has to do with the way that the presentation is written and the way the presentation is developed. In other words, when you write it in the first place, try to stay away from unnecessarily complex language, unnecessary business jargon. Try to be a clear storyteller. You don't need to dumb down the information unnecessarily, but avoid, whenever possible, relying on too many acronyms, too much proprietary, complex sort of industry-specific language, and imagine that you are speaking to an audience of people who may not be as knowledgeable about the subject matter as the audience you're talking to actually may be. And the second thing is your pacing, your enunciation, and your intonation. Most smart people in the worlds of business and government talk too fast. It's a common problem. So through out loud practice, you need to teach yourself to simply slow down, to speak in a conversational tone, and to also be comfortable with occasional brief silences. The best public speakers are not afraid to let a second or two of silence elapse between thoughts, right? Don't just dash from one sentence to the other and keep talking just like this at 100 miles an hour. You can occasionally say something like, "It's important to consider using clear visuals in a presentation." Why is this important? Because, right? And so that pause between thoughts, between words, helps your audience to hear you better, particularly if English is not your first language. And it actually looks good to the audience. It may feel like a very long time to you, the speaker, but it actually says to the audience that this speaker that I'm listening to is self-confident, is confident enough in himself and the material to not be rushing through the presentation. He's taking his time. He's delivering the information on his own terms, and that actually will increase your credibility in the eyes of the audience. So just take your time. Well, first and foremost, I would ask you to err on the side of brevity. Research done recently tells us that in the United States, at least, the average audience's attention span is about 13 to 15 minutes. And we have the internet, we have television, we have lots of things to blame for this. But the truth is that people's attention spans are growing shorter all the time. So first and foremost, if you can figure out a way to deliver your presentation in 15 minutes or perhaps 20 minutes maximum, that's the best approach. If you've got so much material that needs to be delivered to a particular audience, let's say you've got an hour's worth of material, you really need to take pains to break it up into segments and to make it clear to the audience that you're moving from one segment to the next. And then finally, whether you're delivering a presentation in person, and this is particularly true if you're delivering a presentation via video conference or via web meeting, something like the technology we're using now, if you can give your audience a job, right? If you can implement some sort of interactivity, maybe you have a quiz after 15 minutes, maybe you give the audience the opportunity to participate in some way periodically over the course of the long presentation, that will help to hold their attention.
We have another one by Brother Ahmed Al-Khayari, who's asked, are there any challenges in addressing kids?
That's a wonderful question. Well, kids, as you know, are even more visual than we are. So I would say that simply employ some of the fundamentals that I was talking about earlier, using big, beautiful pictures and images and telling stories. And, you know, when you think about the way that you perform when you read a children's book to a child. You don't simply say, you don't sit there and read the book and say, you know, the little boy went to school one day and had an apple at lunchtime, right? You really, really become sort of the persona in the book, and you add a lot of color to your voice and to your presentation. You say, one rainy day, the little boy went to school and he had an apple, right? It is something of a, whether you're delivering a presentation to adults or to children, you have to recognize that it is a performance. It's something of a performance, and you need to be, I'm not trying to turn you into a movie star here, although that might be nice, but you need to be a performing version of yourself. You need to be, you need to be Ali plus 20%, right? And you need to recognize that there's nothing wrong with that. It's simply what you need to do in order to meet the demands of the situation and the medium. It is something of a performance.
All right, great. I think I had earlier seen a hand raised by Dr. Khalid Sheikh. Dr. Khalid Sheikh, can you hear us? I think you had raised your hand earlier. Dr. Sheikh. Okay, let me waste time while we move to the question box. There's another question by Brother Abrar Ahmad. Media and governments have mastered the art of understanding the psychology of people and then giving messages that are untrue, as though they are true. How does one undo this process if one runs a competitor media outlet? Because it's almost like fighting your own types.
Well, that's a very thoughtful and complex question. I think we're talking about a very we're talking about a 30,000-foot question there. In other words, there are many different answers to a question like that. I'd be happy to to continue the conversation with you, sir, offline if you wish, but one core element is simply to be consistent with your own messaging, right? I mean, for example, social media experts, many companies, as you probably know, have teams of people who respond to immediately online through Twitter, through LinkedIn, through YouTube, to any sort of untrue assertion by the competition. There are teams of people who comb the web for everything that's being said about their organization. So there are very sophisticated and comprehensive response strategies for those kinds of things. So once again, I think those kinds of strategies may be too numerous to go into today, but I would just say that first and foremost, be consistent in your own messaging and be aware of what the competition is saying about you.
Yes, I think a lot of people are also asking about your email address to carry forward other questions. So if the permission is allowed from the speaker, we shall certainly share and intimate his personal email address with all of you. So, but let me move to the other questions. There are people who keep on putting questions in the box. Let me try to rather ask Brother Ahmed Al-Khairi. You have posted a question. Would you like to rather speak up and talk to Bill? Brother Al-Khairi. Okay, let me read over the question, I think. Okay, I didn't have a mic, you mentioned. If the presentation has bad news, like addressing board members with lower profits, how should we prepare? Bill?
Well, in journalism we have another expression, and that is don't bury the lead. In other words, delivering bad news is never pleasant, but what the senior management of your company need you to do is to give it to them, and give it to them without any hesitation and without any delay. So I simply would say that you get to the point right away, and you prepare for any anticipated questions, which is probably the most important element of the entire process. In other words, once you've figured out what you need, what this bad news is that you need to deliver to the board or whomever it may be, you then go into a brainstorming session in which you anticipate difficult questions. What are all of the questions that they are likely to ask you? And absolutely, you must be prepared to deal with those kinds of questions and to try to tie your responses to those questions back to the key points that you delivered in the initial part of the presentation, as I said before.
Thanks. Another one from Brother Naeem. Any tips for practicing or maintaining eye contacts?
Yes, my favorite tip for maintaining eye contact, and that's an excellent question because, of course, it can be very uncomfortable to look someone straight in the eye for more than a second or two. But in the interest of trying to maintain strong eye contact, I often say, don't look the person directly in the eyes. Look right at the top of their nose. Look at the bridge of their nose. And it looks as though you are looking them directly in the eye, but it'll be less uncomfortable for both of you. And once again, it all comes down to out loud practice. And one other way that you can give yourself some self-confidence when you're speaking to a room full of people is at the beginning of the presentation, seek out those people in the audience. Make eye contact with those people in the audience who are giving you positive signals, right? If someone is looking at you with an earnest expression or a smile on their face and is nodding in agreement, it'll give you a little psychological boost to look directly at that person rather than the person who may be texting or yawning or rolling their eyes, right? Make it a little bit easier on yourself by at least beginning to connect with the people who are showing you